Okay, hello, welcome to the kind of uh, aftermath of the Whimsy live streams. Um, it's taken a little while for me to. Sorry, my eye line's really weird. Let me try and. I'm gonna put myself in projector mode. Does that help? It does a little bit. Um, because I was looking at my own reflection, and it's um creates an interesting, a strange looking eye line. Um, where I'm not quite staring, like I'm not like staring into the camera, which would be maybe kind of creepy, but also I'm staring like up, like I don't know, maybe just making eye contact with myself. That feels weird here. Maybe that's it. I'm making eye contact with myself, and I don't like eye contact. Being autistic, like Whimsy is, um, it feels wrong. Um, uh, and my cat's meowing. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of go back. This isn't like a commentary. I decided to, at least tentatively, to call this a commentary and epilogue. Um, we'll see how it. I guess it will be a bit of an epilogue because I have some ideas of what the epilogue would be, or at least a few aspects beyond like what we already talked about at the end of the stream. I want to talk about like all three of the iterations. Um, I'm probably gonna create playlists for them, and they might be just like I think I'm tentatively going to call them cycles. It's like this is the first cycle, this is the second cycle, and the third cycle. Um, with only the third one being complete, obviously, because we didn't actually have any run breaking uh, uh, crashes or freezes or whatever that happened, which was awesome. That we actually managed to get to 40 parts. Um, and probably wrap Whimsy's story up. Um, but anyway, there's a few, as far as a commentary, I feel this is a commentary. It's just not in the sense like I'm not going to be playing the video of the various scenes I'm discussing or aspects I'm discussing. I'm just going to be sitting here in Dunny, um, talking about uh, Whimsy's character and kind of off the cuff. Okay, I should have just written down some bullet points. Um, but anyway, Whimsy as a character was a character I created and rolled up for Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition, obviously, um, uh, which is the latest edition at this point in time that I'm recording. Um, and I was hoping to play her in a in some kind of live stream, Dungeons and Dragons live stream. The matter is just finding a group, and finding a group is like already hard, but finding a group online who is doing a live stream and has like an open slot, or it is interested in me and my character. Um, Unfortunately, it just did it hasn't happened yet. Maybe somebody who knows a DM or who is interested in starting up a live stream or whatever is gonna find this video, and we can actually have Whimsy in the setting that she was kind of designed for. Um, she's designed for Forgotten Realms, but she could be in another like setting. Um, just as long as they allow for artificers. I think there's like one live stream thing, and they're like, no, we don't allow anything for ever on, or you know. even though it's like not just from Eberron, it's now in Tasha's cauldron of everything. So it's kind of not just from the Eberron source book. Um, but anyway, I mean, she doesn't necessarily have to be an artificer. It just kind of fits her character the best. Um, like I could convert her into a wizard or something, but anyway, I think that ship sailed anyway. I didn't even try. I maybe should have tried and be like, hey, like I have a character who's an artificer, and I I'm willing to compromise on it a little bit, but I prefer that she be an artificer. Like, and it can be just unusual in the setting that she has. You know, like we could flavor it a bit lower tier, or just make her unusual because she is unusual. But anyway, that's kind of where she started. And then Skyrim Anniversary Edition came out, and I was interested in the idea of doing a role play series of Skyrim. And I've been like, I recently have watched my probably my favorite live streamer currently, anyway, Warrunner. Um, Although he's also done stuff on YouTube, and the particular role play that I'm talking about was actually a YouTube series of Fallout 3, and I thought it was really interesting. You know, and but he was doing it pre-recorded, and I'm doing it just live and off the cuff. I'm sure at least some of what he was doing was kind of off the cuff, um, uh, but I do live streams. It's just kind of an easier way to record. I don't have to worry about like splitting it up because I have the or editing because it's live and we're just preserving the liveness of it. Um, but anyway, um, so Whimsy is autistic as the title would suggest. I am autistic. I am in the upper end of the spectrum, as Whimsy. We're basically a lot alike in that regard, because I'm role playing from what I know, um, both from my own experience and just from uh, uh, a bit of research that I've done. Um, but uh, sorry, I'm loading. Uh, what was I even talking about? I'm in the Asperger's tier, I guess. It is, although I'm not sure if we even use that term anymore, but that was what I was diagnosed with. Um, so she's also female. I myself consider myself to be bigender. Uh, you know, uh, I'm obviously a biological male. If the goatee didn't um, give that away. um, but I express that half of my identity through role playing and through playing as female characters, and when I have the option to. That's just my way of doing it. It's kind of safe, I guess, but that's just my thing. Um, but regardless, let's move on to Whimsy herself and her adventures. I feel that of all the cycles that I have done of her, I think the best ones are probably their very first one and the third one. I don't really remember much from the second one. There may be some moments that I remember from the second one that I thought were part of the first one because they kind of blur together a little bit. But I'm just gonna talk about the first one a little bit. Um, I feel like the first one is most interesting because there's a lot more kind of character development, and a lot more kind of uh, I don't know, just kind of uh, yeah, it's character development. Like there's a lot more of a arc to her character, and when I got into the second and first cycle, I sort of carried over that character development, even though she's kind of her circumstance has been reset, and her memories have been reset, and some details of her backstory are a little different. Originally, I was going to have her be from Hammerfell, but then I decided to move her place of origin to High Rock, um, because I felt it made it a little more sense, I guess, story wise, in lore wise, that she'd be from High Rock than Hammerfell. Um, but anyway, okay. Uh, so the very first cycle was her getting captured um, along the border, and uh, the regular story, and that actually was interesting because I got to kind of role play the trauma of that experience in a couple of interesting instances. Um, uh, uh, so I think the first was probably just her fear of dragons in general. Um, so like when she first like runs into a dragon, she just she runs and hides. Like the very first dragon attack we're involved with, she just runs and hides, and then the guards take care of the dragon, and then everyone says like, "Oh, you're a dragon slayer," and I was like, "No, she's not." She, but it was kind of funny that I guess everyone noticed her running and hiding, and she, even though it was obviously a collaborative effort, her being the dragonborn, like they seemed to think like, oh, she must have been involved somehow. We just didn't see her. Like everything was so hectic. You know, once the dragon appeared, that like no one really noticed that she was gone. And when she came back, they thought she was there the whole time. Um, I mean, it's not a big leap to make. But anyway, uh, and then there's like a moment which I kind of wish, in hindsight, I mean, maybe it does feel spontaneous, but like it took me a moment to like actually to like give a few, probably seconds really. But it still felt a little to me to be a little bit of a delayed reaction because basically when she enters solitude for the first time, and then there's the execution, and she kind of looks at it like I don't want to watch this, and she walks away. But then she hears the headman's axe come down, and then like just a few seconds after that, and I was like, oh my god, PTSD should be kicking in here, and I just kind of had her have a panic attack in that moment, um, and I hope I portrayed that well, um, like I think I may have mentioned in the stream about like when I had the first cat that I ever took care of on my own. Um, there's records of this on my stream, like the exact day it happened. I played Minecraft, and I just like was like, yeah, my cat just died, and I just want to play Minecraft and take my mind off of it. Um, but like discovering her just dead, and uh, like for like months after that, like even after I got my sweet Ellie girl, who's not here right now, but I'm sure she's fine. Um, even after that, I just kind of uh, broke down a little bit, like every few minutes, and it got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, but like it's just um, a traumatic memory, and that would occasionally come back to me, and I just um, so like I've experienced it on a smaller scale, I guess, um, but like no less meaningful. But um, people with legit PTSD, I'm sure it's way worse than that. But it's something I drew from to sort of express, um, to sort of relive it a little bit, but like just kind of base it off of my memory of how I was, uh, and how I sounded, um, and what I was kind of doing in those moments. So yeah, okay. Uh, there was also like some of those other companion mods which I really I loved Marisi. Um, I think it's a little weird that you have the option to romance her, given just the way her character is. Um, but I really like the idea of Whimsy seeing her as a little sister, and I really that's the one thing that I kind of miss from the other subsequent playthroughs was you know not having Maurice either, because I the very first playthrough was um, I think the main reason why the game would crash whenever it went into a new cell was because there were too many scripts happening, or at least that's what I've read, and like I had like three different companions with me at the same time, so I think that was um, and from a role playing standpoint, it felt like uh, I don't know, like she might leave Mauricio back at home potentially. Um, Mirai, maybe that's another possibility, but like I didn't want to like go for that whole storyline all over again. Particularly considering that it's the encounters are not very well designed. Particularly later on, I had to actually use cheat codes, and I believe in my final playthrough, my third playthrough, I didn't really cheat per se. Um, there are a few times where I kind of cheated. I cheated inadvertently, but I never really cheated for anything significant. And the only other cheats I used were based upon the idea of like climbing, being able to climb something, and I would roll for it. And if I was succeeded, she'd be able to climb, and if I failed, she wouldn't be able to climb it. So toggling collision occasionally. I think there was also actually one time where well, there was a big maze, literally in the Legacy of the Dragonborn, and it wasn't a particularly well designed maze. It was just like it was there to be a maze. It was there to be this really complicated space to navigate, and like no, I'm just gonna no clip for this. Like I'm gonna roll like some check. I can't remember what kind of check it was, just to see if she could. She's very intelligent, so she could just map out the maze and find her way through. So we just kind of skill checked her way through and used the no clip to express her finding her way through the maze. Um, so that's probably the time I feel we maybe most cheated. And it was almost like where I toggled God mode because we're carrying around a bunch of stuff to like build um, like a city or whatever to furnish a house, and I just didn't want to put up with carry weight, and it was just like the only thing we were um, really doing was making it so that there was less time would be wasted, carrying things back and forth. So I felt that wasn't really cheating exactly because it didn't have to do with the actual game balance. It just had to do with the busy work of carrying items to and from locations to build furniture and you know what have you. You know, so yeah. And the only problem was that sometimes I forget to toggle God mode off afterwards, and we'd be fighting for a little while. Usually just trash. Um, no, like I don't think we ever had a boss encounter where I had toggle God mode toggled on. That happened. God mode happened a lot in the first playthrough, mostly because we were dealing with modded content, and yeah, I actually at this way I started doing roles because I was rolling for divine intervention because she's kind of like a servant of Akatosh in a way indirectly, so I just had this idea like that every now and then when she's faced with something particularly difficult, she have a chance based upon her level that the higher the level, the more chance she has, although the less she'll need to use it, probably. Um, but yeah, Marisi, like, well written, but very poorly constructed in terms of difficulty. Um, you know, yeah. um, like, if I were to replay it, I would either try to be really high level when I got to like the final boss, basically. Um, Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like I would try to be like at least level 15 before I progress that storyline to the final boss. Um, because she is really tough and not even in a not even in a way that feels fair remotely. Um, there was another moment which I really kind of liked where which actually was part of a creation club thing. It was another moment where we had to use divine intervention to make Whimsy invincible. Also, I was toying around with the idea, particularly in the first and some of the second playthrough, that she would experience every time she died and come back from it. And I think I still did it a little bit the third playthrough, but I think I got good at the game to a certain extent that I didn't need to do that, and I was kind of maybe a little bit tired of the idea, so I wasn't always thinking about it as much. Um, but anyway, uh, you'll hear me doing that a lot. But anyway, um, there was a moment where we uh, like there was a shivering out thing in Anniversary Edition from part of the Creation Club content, where it's a really tough boss that is not really scaled to your character's level properly, um, and it's just like a health sponge and a damage dealer, um, and I used Divine Intervention to toggle God mode on, and then um, Lydia, our companion at the time, died, and I decided, okay, let's just let this happen, maybe as a consequence of her, tapping into this power, even though she didn't do it consciously. Um, and let's just explore her grief. And once again, I was trying to tap into my experience of Yukiko, my kitty. Um, and yeah, that was, you know, uh, she went into Labyrinthian, uh, uh, you know, just after that, and she just sort of walked through her not caring about what happened. And I, I think I talked about that. She wasn't really suicidal per se in that moment. She just was kind of numb and didn't care to do anything, um, defend herself at all. Maybe part of it was just knowing that it didn't matter because she'd be reset anyway. Um, and then the moment of like, why can't I die? The screaming, why can't I die? Was I think just kind of um, more of that was kind of just in the moment, like just improvised. But afterwards, I thought like that her actual experience was that she was in this moment particularly aware of crossing that threshold toward a furious basically, and then being yanked back, and that just being acutely aware of that sensation in that moment, and just the sense of like finally it's over, but then nope, it isn't. Um, really just with her emotion combined with her own emotional state was just like yeah. Um, like I think for me the most memorable moments of my role playing were in the very first session, and it is a shame that none of them are really canonical to um, the second playthrough because I didn't want to retread. I didn't want to like be like, oh well, because I did all these beats and moments in the first playthrough, I need to go through and redo them in the second playthrough so we will have proper continuity. I didn't necessarily want to try and like cheat my way ahead or just play like try to play up to exactly the same point where we left off, and continue from there, um, with like a new save. I you know I'm pretty sure if I like cheated or use like set stage or something that like something would happen and it would break the game. Like I didn't even think to do that. I could have, but like uh, I don't know. And there's a fair chance that we run into some of the same problems. Uh, but anyway, Lydia, it was just kind of actually no, it wasn't Lydia, it was Marisi. Yeah, it was Marisi that went where she went through the where she went for Labyrinthian because there's a point in Marisi's story where um uh sorry, I'm confusing characters arcs, but there's a point in Marisi's story where basically we learn that she spoilers for the Marisi mod. If this is the very first thing you're watching, spoilers for my entire playthrough, all three of my playthroughs, um, uh, as well. But there's a point where Marisi, um, like she's lost her memories. She uh, gains them back and then throws herself off of the tower because her memories are really bad. And then like we're going to like reset her, lock her memories away again, but then she's going to like associate subconsciously associate you with those memories, like, or those there's a chance that she will start subconsciously associating those bad memories with you. So she may not ever want to see you again. Um, and at that point, like that was when she first kind of became a little bit suicidal. Um, Not quite really, but like just in a funk of depression. Um, and kind of with the awareness that she can't die. Um, yeah. Um, she just kind of didn't care, and then she was frustrated that she didn't die. Um, um, then I think after Lydia happened, there was like a Falmer dungeon that I was going through. I think it was Serana. I'm pretty sure it was with Serana, and she just kind of went wild. And I think one of the times she like where she died and came back, it's like why couldn't that happen? Like there were some times where I reload because a character accidentally died, um, and I just decided not to do that for Lydia because I wanted to explore the grief of it, but like I did feel like her that superpower sort of added that a new dimension of grief because she doesn't really consciously control that superpower, and it is granted to her by the gods. So, or by Akatosh, effectively. Um, I feel like it added an interesting spin to things. Um, but anyway, I don't think I have much to say about the second playthrough because I think it was somewhat brief, and I don't remember there being anything particularly memorable about it. The third playthrough was very focused on the Serana dialogue add-on, I believe was what it's called. Um, let me look up. Um, yeah, it's Serana dialogue add-on. Um, and this next one with Almira is also focused on it because I love it so much, and there's new content for various factions, um, and guilds and what have you, where she has things to say. So I wanted to explore this with, like, again, just with a different character and focusing on the content uh, that anyway that has nothing to do with this. Um, Focusing mainly on the new content and content that we hadn't explored, such as the companions in the original playthrough. Um, but anyway, um, but there's also a focus on her being polyamorous, and I am not personally polyamorous. At least I don't think I am. I just like the idea of at least like in a video game context, you know, uh, exploring relationships with multiple characters in a single playthrough. I first kind of did that with Dragon Age Inquisition with the multi romance mod. Um, there was the first time I explored the idea of a character who's polyamorous. Here is a little smaller scale because it's literally just like um, three characters with only two. Ultimately, for most of the game, it's only like two characters, and even then, there's a different dynamic between each of them. Um, um, and most of the romance for the whole thing is focused on Serana. Um, Only in the very final episode do we even get into Jarl Elisif, um, which we'll need to talk a little more about that later. Basically, first there is Ayla, which is you know more of a friends with benefits scenario. Um, and her first intimate relationship of her life. I believe I established that um, as a fact um, at some point. Um, uh, but anyway, um, uh, when it came to Serana, uh, I felt that the polyamorous aspect, like, there's a couple ways I could have actually gone with it. One was to one thing I definitely wanted to do with that for sure was to make uh, sure that it was clear that not Almira, Whimsy, in spite of being polyamorous, it is willing to settle down, is willing to commit to Serana because she loves her that much, and she is ultimately something of a lawful good character. She'll bend the law occasionally. She may even break it somewhat, but she's very much a person of principles, and and I think if polyamory is just kind of it's hard to say, but I would imagine that some people who are polyamorous maybe can't really help it any more than uh, a gay person can help being gay, or a straight person can help being straight, um, or a transsexual person can help being transsexual. They just um, it might be slightly less so, but you know I don't. This is something I haven't done a lot of research into, so um, excuse me for going into role playing a character, without much knowledge of uh, what it means. But I just felt like I wanted to commit to um, the idea of at least a particular flavor of polyamorous character who is not just a James Bond, who isn't just like someone who would sleep with anyone. A person who's actually interested in, or is willing to have a committed relationship, or even just be like, you're the one I truly love, but I want to, explore other types of love with other people, or um, and intimate relationships with other people, um, but only with your consent, only with if you say no to that, if you're not comfortable with that, then I will abstain and be committed purely to you. And I felt that her willingness to do that was important. I think actually having Serana, as a character who isn't designed to have a response to that. Obviously, we had to kind of role play around that, and I think I had some roles made which were not like partly skill check, but also partly just kind of looking at fate. I think I kind of skewed it a little bit more toward the idea of. I think I maybe even had a roll with advantage, which means to like roll two dice and take the higher result. Um, because I ultimately felt that the idea of Sorna just being like, no, I'm not comfortable with this. I want it to be only me and you, and if you are comfortable with it just being me and you, then let's just do that. Um, you know, of it, of the idea of Whimsy being monogamous, um, to me is less interesting the idea of than the idea of her being willing to be monogamous. Um, I felt her willingness to be monogamous with Serana was more important than actually having her become monogamous. Because then if Serana just if we decide that Serana isn't okay with it, and then she just becomes monogamous, and there's nothing left to explore within her polyamorous nature, other than maybe occasionally she'll have to restrain herself, I guess, a little bit. Um, could be a little bit interesting, but I felt that properly exploring that aspect of her character was more interesting, and just having that note that she is willing, of her willingness to uh, be with only Serana. Okay, I'm getting my Asperger's broken record thing. I think I talked about it during my stream, but to reiterate, I tend to like myself to. I have a tendency to want to make myself clear, and sometimes in doing so, and sometimes in my interest in doing so, I repeat myself. Um, so bear with me. Uh, okay. Uh, and my pauses are also just be trying to figure out how to put this, and also like trying to figure out where I am actually in this discussion. It's also her relationship with Serana is actually kind of interesting, kind of double-edged sword, for me lack of a better analogy. Because uh, when it came to, I guess we're gonna skip forward to kind of the conclusion. Um, to her relationship with Jarl Ellisy, which is kind of a last minute addition. Uh, and a little behind the scenes. Um, Initially, my idea was that maybe Ellisy was seeking out a marriage um, with the Dragonborn because when it would help to solidify her position in a future moot to uh, make her the High Queen. That um, and there were a few mods that I was sort of playing with when we started our final part, um, that would uh, allow us to become High Queen. And one of the ways to become High Queen was just to marry Elosif, but then the options didn't present itself, and I was confused. And like the only option that there's like two different mods to become High King / High Queen, and I tried one, and I tried the other. One didn't seem to work. Like I went to the guy who I was supposedly supposed to talk to initiate this, and I couldn't speak for them. So I went and did the other mod, and that sort of went on. But then I didn't really have the option to interact with Elise in a way where I could actually marry her. Like I didn't have the option to put it on Amulet Mara. Nope, can't marry her. Okay, like maybe it's because like maybe there's something in this Serana mod that actually does make us like married to Serana, even though like it isn't really what I understand. Like we're not married to her because we don't actually go for the whatever. Because we are kind of married for all intents and purposes. The idea is that there was no ceremony, therefore we aren't legally married, but um we Whimsy and Serana are definitely like consider themselves to be wife and wife. Um But when it came to like LSC, it's kind of like, okay, this is gonna be like polygamy basically, um, in a sense. Although legally, she's only at the end of it, she's only legally married to LSC. She does still consider Serana to be her first wife. Um, but from a perspective of the law of the law of the law, um, Elisif is her wife, and Serana is only a mistress. Um, but anyway, the double edged sword thing. Basically, when it came to like whether or not Elisif would consent to the idea of having this kind of polygamous relationship with Serana in the mix was interesting because Serana's okay with it, and uh, I think I may have done a role to convince Elisif of the arrangement. Again, it was kind of partly just fate, partly all the fate being on our side because like this is kind of what I want to have happen. So and at that point, Elisif was effectively in love with our character anyway, so I decided there would be an advantage due to that. You know, kind of a combination of my own GM's prerogative and uh, yeah, and you know, justifying it slightly, um, you know, in war. But and again, maybe with the idea that like you know that polygamy and polyamory, or at least polyamory, I guess, because again legally this isn't polygamy. Um, is like not. I know that like in medieval times it wasn't uncommon for people of nobility or you know of uh, like kings and queens and such to actually have mistresses. Um, Kings particularly because you know misogyny, but or patriarchy, I guess. Um, I'd probably say patriarchy more than misogyny. Um, uh, I'd probably say misogyny is not part of it. You know, it's kind of the opposite, really, when you think about it. Um, you love women too much, and loving one woman it just isn't enough. Um, if, but I digress. Um, so, but you know, it was important that Elithif uh, consent to that kind of arrangement, and ultimately we decided that she did. You know, parts that otherwise the plot couldn't really progress, and but you know the thing is that just the way you know she would is willing to uh you know enter into a committed relationship with Thrana. She is unwilling to budge on you know if I'm going to marry someone else or if I'm going to enter into a committed type of relationship with someone else other than Serana. It cannot be a relationship where Serana is left out of the equation. You know, basically you know, if you're going to marry me, it's a package deal. You're buying one and you're getting another free. I insist. Um, you know, that's not to say that like you know she would insist on including Serana in any intimate activities. You know, I'm not even sure if I'd codify at this point whether or not Elisif, Elisif as portrayed in the Amber's Adventures mod, would totally be down for it. But we'll get to that very shortly. But basically, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like. I'll leave it up to you, dear viewers, whether or not you think the LSE would be okay with a freeway. Um, if I can even say that, I'm hoping that like the Amber's Adventures episode isn't gonna like. It's not monetized anyway. But um, fortunately, it's not too explicit. It could have been if I used a certain variant of it, but it was a little uncomfortable. Mainly because I was trying to roleplay and I was like, I can't roleplay this. I can't even roleplay around this. What the hell am I supposed to do? And my ultimate conclusion was, this is fan fiction, or at least parts of it are. Um, I think I discussed the Amorous Adventures. I have issues with it. Um, because I feel like there should be a version of it, particularly for the LOC quest lines, where you're not because I like the idea of being able to romance individual characters and have like a storyline based around romancing individual characters, and potentially even having the option to go after multiple of them. The only problem is that Elusiv's quest line in particular requires you to romance multiple characters along the way, many of which, I might add, are portrayed in incredibly problematic ways. Particularly with regard to Lydia and the Sword Maiden, whose name I can't remember. Um, you're literally like I didn't even play for Lydia's because I didn't like the direction it was going, so I just like skipped to the end of it using console commands. That was probably the biggest cheat we did, and by we I mean me really, because it's all on me. But because I just didn't want to go there. I didn't want like, and also because I was a little pressed for time, and I had to work the next day, and then even then I stayed up way too late because this was supposed to be the finale. It's episode 40. I want to end on a nice divisible by 5 number. Um, so yeah, I did want to go for that. But even then, I still had to go for some of that. The Barnes College being basically an escort service for to use the most uh, to to put it lightly, I guess. Um, it's just crazy. Um, it's fun in a way, but it's also like for someone who's trying to roleplay and trying to roleplay someone who just isn't like that. Um, it was kind of painful. To be honest, and I just had to like be like, okay, this is happening very differently, at the very least. This is not what's actually happening with the character. Whimsy is not like this. And that brings me to basically what I feel are the three. I see Whimsy as being something of a lawful good character. I think I mentioned that before. Um, you could go and say that she's more neutral good because she does occasionally kind of bend things a little bit, although some of it's not canonical because like the I wanted to do the Stones of Berenzia quest line, and the only way to do that is to join the Thieves Guild, and the only way to join the Thieves Guild and get access to it is to commit a few crimes. So we kind of just retconned that she found a way to like you could actually go to the Dragon Flag and meet with I think Vex is her name, which is just weird because I think of Critical Role Vex. um, whenever I hear that name. But anyway, she just got a hold of her. Did not need membership with the Thieves Guild. Just was able to like just look at this, okay? And it grabbed her attention, and she decided to help us. Um, that's canonically what happened. Um, so that was like probably another big moment where I had to like retcon things a bit. Um, Literally retcon. The other thing is more of is a different kind of retcon. But a lot of it, like Lydia and the Sword Maiden, were basically gradually and persistently pressuring them into sex. Okay, and that is totally not Whimsy. So Whimsy's like rule when it comes to relationships was it is I guess first and foremost it needs to be consensual. I I that wasn't even the first rule I came up with, but like that is effectively, if you say no, that's the end of discussion. Okay, you know, like there's this one thing where like we need to do S&M freeway and like canonically, even if this was actually happening, she would probably not like turn to her uh, house Carl. I can't remember what the name was. Um, and be like, "Oh, you do this," and like she says, "No." Okay. Like she probably would bring in Serana, like and just be like, "Are you okay with this?" And if Serana said no, like, "Well, okay, I'm out of ideas now," because she was like, "Bring a friend," and like if maybe go to Ayla, like are you up for this? Ayla might actually be up for it, like the challenge of it, maybe. Um, and Ayla is literally a friend. Um, but the whole scenario did not happen canonically. But if it did, that's how it would have canonically happened. Um, and there's this whole, again, the whole Bard's College being basically an escort service or house of ill repute. Um, no, like this is the product of an overly imaginative fan writing, trying to create their own version of what happened. And how the Dragonborn and Endlessly met, and how they fell in love, and with this idea that like, oh, well, she's polyamorous. When that's kind of somewhat common knowledge because I mean, obviously, I probably say that like her having a mistress is somewhat public knowledge. Um, and she's probably, I'd say that she's kind of out as being polyamorous. So like, oh, she must be a playgirl then, or she must be a player basically, and just going around seducing everyone she meets, and like that's literally how it plays out in the Amorous Adventures mod. So like, she's only so I say like she's only ever been intimate canonically with a, in order Ayla, Serana, and Elisif. Those are the only three people she's ever been intimate with, and end of story. You know, I mean, being autistic, it's hard for her to form any kind of relationship, let alone an intimate one. So, um, I think that's kind of the limit. Um, So yeah. Uh, okay. So first rule is consent, and it must be more or less immediate. Like she's not gonna press the issue and be a sleazebag about it. Like we're forced to be in the frickin' mod. Um, uh, the second rule is that she has to know you. She has to know you before she knows you. Um, like we have to be at least on a level of good friends because she likes to have some kind of connection beyond just the physical to be involved in that scenario. So that's pretty much the second rule. The third rule is that we have to be kind of mutually attracted to each other in one regard or other. Um, so those are basically her three rules. And I guess a fourth rule that well is probably ties back into consent, which is informed consent. You have to know that like this is probably not going to be a exclusive thing. In fact, even more so, if Serana involved, it cannot be an exclusive thing because if we become exclusive, that means I have to cut off Serana, and I'm never going to cut off Serana. You know, because Serana was there first, and because we have this established relationship, um, that's just the way it's going to be from that point forward. It's you know, Whimsy and Serana are a package deal for anyone who wants to have any kind of other any kind of intimate relationship with. I mean, it's not a package deal. Like it doesn't have to be a freeway every time. Um, you know, but you have to accept that like I'm going to be intimate with Serana because that's what we are. You have to accept that if you're going to accept me into your life in that regard. So just be aware. Um, which I guess brings me into what is effectively the epilogue. Um, so this fan fiction, I just I'm not sure. Like I think it's canonical that it exists in the setting. Um, and I think it's interesting to just explore the idea of what if we're actually out there and actually got like printed and semi widely circulated. Because it's just an amusing idea to think of. You can take it and leave it in terms of whether or not you think that should happen in terms of and the response to it should be what it is. Um, because I'm of the opinion that like the story should be as much the viewers as it should be mine. So like if you don't think this is a cool idea or a good idea to have things unfold this way, well okay you can just write it off. I'm okay with that because like it's an epilogue. It's kind of optional. I'm just kind of interested to explore what would happen if this kind of story got out there. Um, Obviously, it would cause a little bit of a scandal. Um, I mean, there's some big of a scandal with regard to OFC and Whimsy being married anyway. Some people thinking it like, oh, it's a power play for Whimsy to become High Queen herself. That like, or that like, well, she's not even a Nord. She's a freaking beast folk. Like, what's up with that? Like, you know, should the wife of our new High Queen, like, Dragonborn or not, savior of Skyrim or not, there are probably like some number of people, particularly like in the what originally would have been the Stormcloaks, um, being not cool with it, um, simply on grounds of racism. Um, Also, the fact that Whimsy was actually a member of the Imperial Legion, although I think that there may have been some consideration to just allow Whimsy to retire from the Legion, even though like it typically isn't allowed. But due to her exemplary there could be a degree to which, due to her exemplary service and due to basically three factors: one, her exemplary service; two, being the frickin' Dragonborn and having saved Skyrim and quite possibly the Empire as a whole. Um, in Nirn, the plane of Mundus, um, from being devoured by Alduin. Um, whether or not that is actually what was actually Alduin's intent, or if his intent was simply to rule over Tamriel or Nirn. Um, it would have been bad either way. Um, so, and also due to political implications would be the third thing, because they don't want to they don't want to create the impression that any further reason to make people think that Elisif is just a pawn of the Empire, and that her marriage to a member of the Imperial Legion, to an active member of the Imperial Legion, is just further evidence of that fact or idea. So just be like, well, okay, she's no longer a member of the Imperial Legion, so she's granted that that's only going to do so much, but it might alleviate things a little bit. Um, that she's no longer an active member of the Imperial Legion. Um, uh, so yeah. Um, and I think Whimsy technically, well, has been somewhat emphatic on the idea that she has no interest in that kind of power. Um, she just as well handed over. If something were to happen to Elisif, she'd just as soon. Heck, at this point, she probably would handle it over the Polgriff. You know, she'd only have interest in naming or trying to um, have some say in Elisif's successor if it came down to that. Um, she would not want the position herself. Like, if people insisted, if the people were like, "Oh, well, you're the hero, you're the Dragonborn. Well, we want you as our High Queen." Um, and that's actually like one of my initial ideas for Elisif uh, marrying Whimsy is just. I think I already mentioned that, like that it was sort of to give her a position of strength within the mood, to be like, well, I'm also married to the Dragonborn, so like that might at least convince some of the other jarls that might have been hesitant otherwise. I don't know. Um, I think now if it being more of a romantic thing makes a little more sense than just it being political. Um, there may have been a political aspect to it too, but also there's her being uh, there's the other things I mentioned that kind of probably offset that and make it a kind of wash, I guess. um, I mean, being savior of Skyrim is probably still not insignificant. It's probably more. It's more than enough to offset like her being uh, a former member of the Imperial Legion and Beast Folk. Um, anyway, um, getting to my point of the fan fictions that are sort of being published and out there. Um, Scandal, threat of censorship, or of just banning the book entirely. And Whimsy was kind of like, she was amused by it a little bit, like she's amused by it, the story, as a work of largely as the fan fiction is, somewhat offended by the portrayal of herself as being kind of a little bit of a problematic sleazebag. But it was still kind of fun. Um, and consider, like, she's smart, she's intelligent. Um, she basically was like, okay, well, I don't think we should take this book off shelves or we should ban the book. I think what we should do is reach out to the publisher and be like, okay, maybe a recall, possibly, but let's see if we can like do a new printing with a forward written by Whimsy, basically explaining that like this is a work of fiction that is only has some similarities to actual events. Like once you get to certain chapters, like the chapter where they like have a wedding ceremony where they just go at it in front of a group of people. Like that clearly didn't happen. There's no historical record of that happening, and everyone who was supposedly involved in it would deny it and suggest it as absurd. I mean, maybe a lot of people will be go, "Oh, well, it's just a big old cover up," um, but Whimsy will also make a very big point of if you think this is how you seduce women, you're gonna get slapped. You're not gonna get very much. You're not gonna get very far into that with that kind of attitude. Um. So yeah. An approach. Uh. I mean, maybe some people will end up getting that far. I don't know, but they totally don't deserve it. Um. So yeah. That's kind of what happens in my own version of the story. If you feel that's like ridiculous, and you could just be able to the fan fiction never really got a whole lot of circulation and or never really published as such. Um, whatever you think would happen is what happens. But yeah, I think I kind of discussed what I kind of consider to be canon that it was an attempt on Elisif's life, that it involved some similar aspects to what we saw in the mod, but ultimately, uh, there may or may not have actually been any kind of proper wedding ceremony. There may have been something of a mock wedding ceremony, but there was no consummation required for the the spells to be undone. Um, Also, some of these events were probably happening alongside some of the events that um, some of the other adventures that wasn't like all happening at once at the very end the way we it was presented. I think my idea is that they happened kind of gradually as Whimsy was having other adventures, so we're kind of going in between previous things to show the development of their romance. Um, so, I mean, a fairly easy example is that when she went to retrieve the horn, or to place the horn at the Shrine of Talos, was when she saw the specter of Elisif's husband. Um, but anyway, uh, I think that's kind of it. Uh, oh yeah, and then basically like, the very final quest, which I think is the best written thing, apparently it's part of a contest, which actually kind of makes sense because I think it has a very different writing style approach to writing than a lot of everything else. Where this is very focused on the Dragonborn and Endless Thief together, whereas everything else is like, oh, you gotta romance, you gotta sleep with all these other women to get to be with Endless Thief. It's like, why? You know, again, my preference for the Amorous Adventures mod would be to have it personally laser focused on romancing characters individually, and not going on this elaborate thing where you have to seduce multiple women to get to the one you're actually wanting to pursue. That way, you have the choice to be polyamorous and pursue all these characters romantically in a single go, or um, be more monogamous in your pursuits. Um, so yeah, I want a version of Amorous Adventures which allows you to just romance individual that gives you the option to be monogamous, basically. Um, anyway, that's probably my biggest critique is I kind of just I'm not. I think maybe the mod in general is kind of designed that way. It's just that they wanted LOC, the path to LOC, to be a little more epic, a little more involved. So they just tied in a lot of these other romances to it, and it just kind of makes it feel a lot more icky to me anyway, and to my sensibilities role playing as Whimsy. Like if I were romancing someone who was actually a player and was totally okay with you know and a sleaze bag, which I don't think I'd ever actually do. Um, like I don't think I'd ever actually like legitimately, given the way Lydia is written in particular, I would just be like, no, I'm not pressuring her into any of this. Like Whimsy would be okay with romancing Lydia, particularly in the first playthrough, um, where we were actually kind of together for a while. I mean, a lot of the development of the relationship was kind of off screen because there isn't a lot of that kind of interaction. But we would not be pressuring her throughout the entire thing. Like, oh, please sleep with us. No, I really like you to sleep with me. No, it's like pestering her and that's harassment. Okay, we need to get HR. We need to get Fane HR involved in this thing. Anyway, hashtag cancel Amber's Adventures. We need to cancel Amber's Adventures. I'm sorry. It is way too problematic. Like it's fun to some extent if you don't take it too seriously, but it's definitely problematic. I think there should be a less problematic version of it. And again, I'd really like one that just revises the LSC thing so that you don't have to, so that you can pursue her and only her, and have again the option to be more of a decent human being or beast folk being or whatever. Anyway, um, I've gone on for like probably over an hour. I'm actually surprised this isn't longer. Um, but this is the finale. I'm gonna go back to playing Almira shortly. Although at this point, I'll already have by the time I upload this, I'll already have gone back to playing Almira. But anyway, um, thanks for watching. We'll go to the outro screen here. once I scroll up to it. Okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks for. Hopefully, you've gone through the entire thing. At least the first cycle. The first cycle probably works fairly well as a standalone thing. There's probably some things I didn't really talk about. Oh, there's a little backstory, which I think is interesting. That's probably one of the things I'm most proud of with regard to uh, the third playthrough. There's a few things that I think I'm fairly proud of in that. But like her backstory of like having her childhood friend basically confess to her not being like where she realizes that she's a lesbian. Um, like that was you know an interesting idea, and I really need to move this so it's like feels a little more centered. I guess too late, but like if ever you have to use this scene again. Um. Anyway, okay, I think it's enough. I think that there's probably some other moments that I could like comment on. Oh yeah, there was the whole thing of Boethia was interesting. Like having you just outright refuse to do a particular quest. Um, there's also like the opposite where like she wouldn't do the quest, but part of it was just wanting to hear Serrano's response to it because supposedly she's supposed to have commentary on that quest, but it just didn't play for some reason. Um, that was kind of the only reason why I did the House of Horrors quest, and also because we just happened to run into the guy uh, who was supposed to be sent back to the House of Horrors. Um, anyway, um, it was kind of amusing because the idea was that she's trying to break him out and accidentally hitting him as she's trying to break him out. I mean, it actually was a pretty clever way of trying to circumvent, uh, like, play out the quest without actually. I wonder if we could have actually just left, and like it's possible the door would have been locked again, and we just wouldn't have been able to leave until we actually killed that guy. Um, which would have been unfortunate and bad game design. But anyway, let's stop. Okay, there's a bunch of things you can do that take a few seconds of your time, as well as uh, other things that are a bit more involved, um, such as another Patreon, such as checking out our Minecraft realm. But of course, it's all entirely up to you, and I thank you so very much for watching it. This nearly 1.5 hour video of me just kind of rambling a bit and going into my own thoughts and commentary on a playthrough and whatever. So anyway, I appreciate your viewership. Um, and as always, um, until next time. Okay, until next time. Sayonara.